Hello and welcome. I'm Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX. Big tariffs from several countries across the world, including India. Trump listed out countries who he said charge the U.S. tremendous amount of tariffs, whether European Union, China, Brazil, Mexico, and Canada. However, he singled out India as well during his speech. He further announced that the U.S. will impose reciprocal tariffs on several nations from 2nd April. This comes amidst a global trade war after the Trump administration slapped steep tariffs on Canada, Mexico, as well as China. While markets across the world promptly took a hit, it seems they're slowly recovering from the slump. But it's not just tariffs. The war in Ukraine, illegal immigration, the gold card, U.S. fresh tender policy, and the war against terror have also taken center stage during his speech. Ambassador Bashwati Mukherjee, former diplomat, is joining us live. Major General S.B. Asthana, strategic affairs analyst, is live with us. Rabinder Sachdev, international affairs expert, is joining us live. Professor Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, is live with us. Satya Kumar, economist, is also joining us on the broadcast. Satya Kumar, let me make a start with you. Markets have taken a hit to this speech by the U.S. president at the U.S. Congress. What do you make of the economic impact of his comments, and also generally the sluggish note the markets have taken ever since Trump came to the presidency?
Definitely, the Trump under his regime now is looking at the ultra protectionism. That's what I can coin as a word, because considering the fact that is increasing the tariffs for the other, which is increasing the tariff, which is actually going to cause trade barriers for various developing countries. Take, for example, India, China, even some of the European countries are dependent on US. So by looking at Trump's policy and the way he is trying today in today's speech, he's saying that what Mr. Joe Biden has missed from the perspective of the American dream. That's what I can understand. So considering the tax tariffs are increased for all the products which are getting imported from especially China, even some of the products from India. So many of the countries are going to be in the disadvantaged situation, and this is going to have a direct impact on the markets of those countries. And especially India, if you see the trade is quietly dependent upon, even service industry is having a dependency on the US. And this policy measures taken by aggressive policy measures taken by Trump is going to affect the markets in a big way. And we can see that we can see the effect on the markets in the recent times. After Trump got elected, the markets are not performing that great, and there is a kind of a slowdown happening in the countries which are depending on US. So that's my take from the Trump's speech today. And increasing the tariffs left, right, center, and blaming Joe Biden. And as he has also told how many executive orders he has passed and how many decisions he has taken since the time he came to power. So these announcements are being made, and he has also spoken about MSMEs and SMEs in America, how they are going to benefit out of it. Just the developing countries speak. So I think he's looking at protectionism, ultra protectionism. And this will fracture the trade around the world. It will fracture the trade around the world, and is going to have a huge economic impact and ramification, and it will have a direct impact on the capital market of those countries.
All right, let me in fact quickly take that across to you as well, Ambassador Bashwati Mukherjee. Ambassador Mukherjee, what was your interpretation of these remarks by the U.S. President, the topics touched upon him, and the tone and tenor of his address at the U.S. Congress? What was your interpretation of it? What stood out for you in his address?
Well, I think actually his tone and tenor was not as aggressive as it usually is. I was surprised when he singled out, for instance, the First Lady for special praise. He talked about some of the measures that he's done, which United States badly needed. He made the point about Biden again and again to make the point that there were several glaring issues that could have been addressed by President Biden, but which were not done. This was not just for trade. There was also a great emphasis on illegal immigration and its impact on the US economy if it went on in this manner unchecked. As far as the tariffs are concerned, in my perspective, so I'm not an economist, but a diplomat and a historian by discipline, but in my perspective, they would impact much more United States major trading partners. We are not a major trading partner of the United States, fortunately. So hopefully we would be less impacted But if the entire global economy is impacted, given that it's a globalized world, yes, we would be impacted, but so would United States, which is precisely what happened in Joe Biden's time when he imposed unilateral sanctions on Russia for oil and gas without going through the Security Council, and they came right back and impacted the economy, particularly of the European Union, not so much of the United States, but of the European Union. Um, I also believe that since he is a very transactional man and looks at the whole world from the perspective of a transactional businessman rather than a great statesman or the president of the world's only superpower, he is actually threatening, and he is imposing tariffs which could be rolled back if those whom he is threatening fall in line. For example, we read in the newspapers today that, for instance, on Panama Canal, it would appear that a solution is emerging. As far as Zelensky is concerned, he has been thrashed so badly in public that he is now making very conciliatory noises because the European Union has realized that without the American defense all over Europe, they are very vulnerable to Russia. This realization has now dawned on the EU after a very long time, because earlier when the European Union wanted to arm itself, that was in the pre-Brexit time, it was the faithful poodle of United States, that's the United Kingdom, that always stood in the way of the Europeans developing their own armed forces, their army, etc. So I think that in many ways, his address to the Congress is a wake-up call to the closest allies of the United States. It's also a wake-up call for us that we really now need to conclude free trade agreements with other partners as soon as possible, with the UK, with the EU, etc. Because and we also need to reduce some of the tariff barriers that we had imposed. Some we have already, which don't really matter uh, as far as that famous motorcycle is concerned. We need to reduce tariffs on imported alcohol, or we need to make our tariff regime uh, reasonable so that trading partners don't take advantage of us, but it is possible to conclude an FTA with a trading partner which is mutually beneficial. So we really need, rather I should say not we, because Ministry of External Affairs has always favored FTAs from ever since I can remember. And the hugest problems that MEA faced always was with the Ministry of Commerce of India, which has a very different and very negative approach to FTAs. So now I think we would have to also not climb down, but reduce some of our tariffs and also go forward and, as has been promised, conclude that FTA with the European Union by the end of the year. The European Union, we will find, will be much more conciliatory now because they've been hit badly by what Trump has done. The UK will be much more conciliatory because the main problem we had earlier with the India EU BTIA, as we used to call it in the old days, was because the UK was part of EU and did not want a free trade agreement between India and EU, because our points of strength are also UK's points of strength. We are both service economies, etc. My colleague, who's a well-known economist, would know that better than me. But this was the main hurdle we had when we negotiated. I was part of the negotiating team, and each time the EU would say okay, and they would go back and consult, and you'd find the United Kingdom has put another obstacle in the path of the negotiation. So yes, I think that in many ways the Trump's address was a wake-up call. He's a very unusual American president. I'm told that he also publicly thanked Pakistan today. So it's very interesting because you never know today what he's going to do tomorrow. That certainly puts the entire globe in a kind of state of uncertainty and watchfulness. But since he's a businessman, I don't think he will take us to the brink. He will always draw back before he falls into the precipice and takes the rest of the global economy down.
All right, Mijal Asthana, let me quickly draw you in here. Mijal Asthana, as far as, of course, now, the Ukraine situation was concerned as well, there were comments on that too. How do you see the geopolitics of that really panning out after, of course, the decision that the United States has taken vis-a-vis military aid. Also, interestingly, the comments that Trump keeps on making on Zelensky and his utterances. And, also the position that he seems to be taking on India. Of course, these are all comments just related to tariffs. But should we worry?
I don't think there is a need to worry, because although people say that it is unpredictable, but as a strategist, let me tell you that everything is predictable and everything is fits into the bigger design. Now, the bigger design is that for Americans, even their forefathers have told that don't tackle China and Russia together. So therefore, if your main adversary is and main competitor is China, then certainly you need to get at least Russia neutral, if not on your side. That's one requirement. Now, for that, the war in Ukraine, it is of interest to Europe, certainly, but it is not of that much of interest to USA. Whereas Indo-Pacific may not be of that much of interest to Europe as it is for USA. Similarly, the Indo-Pacific is going to be the future center of gravity of economics as well as all other activities. So therefore, his concentration towards there is essential. And therefore, what he is doing is he's trying to reduce the engagement elsewhere. Similarly, if you see now, you put the whole focus in even in Middle East. Now, in Middle East, his ideas may look absolutely wonky, but basically what he's trying is let the Middle East be handled by Israel. Let me help Israel, and he will take care of the entire Middle East. I will concentrate on Indo-Pacific, and all I need to do is keep helping Netanyahu. He will do the rest and follow my interests. That's one part of it. So, in that context, a peace or a deal from which he can make best of Ukraine, he can make best of Russia, that suits his overall strategic plan. And now, if you put all the actions which he has done, they all fit in the correct boxes as to where, what is he actually heading for. Similarly, as far as the other things are concerned, tariff, he has got a strategy. Trump, in my opinion, has a strategy that you first give a maximal choice to the adversary or to the negotiator, which is almost which looks like an impractical one. And then you start negotiating and come down to practical limits. Now, all these tariffs which he is going to come down because American public will get affected and will get affected quite badly. So therefore, you will find that there will be certain concessions given, there will be certain negotiations, something else will happen. But at the same time, he will at the end of the day, he will try to get the balance of trade in his favor or will reduce the disadvantages which he is suffering. Similarly, he is quite blunt in calling out. Now, when we look at that, he's called out India. The fact is, out of G20 countries, India is imposing maximum tariffs.
Yes.
Statement of fact. That's a statement of fact. Now, he has called it out. It looks bad to us, but we have our own reasons to do so, because we are a developing economy. We have to protect our trade. And that's why we have certain valid reasons to do so what we have done. But notwithstanding that, we will have to accommodate. So that's one requirement which he has. Similarly, thanking Pakistan. Now, it is for a specific purpose. Now, what there was a ISIS terrorist leader. This guy has killed 13 Americans, and Pakistan has helped him in apprehending that. If, let's say, tomorrow Pakistan helps us in apprehending Hafiz Saeed, we will also thank Pakistan, I suppose.
Okay.
So I don't think we should read more into that as far as that particular line is concerned.
Okay.
So I think there is a strategy behind it.
Yes, Professor Nalapad, let me quickly draw you in here into this conversation on, of course, Donald Trump's speech at the US Congress. What stood out for you? Do you believe it was pretty consistent to what he's been saying earlier? Were you surprised by something in particular? Also, of course, the tariff impact on the globe's economy. What is that going to be? Markets fall, markets recover, but what is going to be the overall impact of this?
Look, let me first talk to you about the entire speech. It was very expertly crafted, and frankly, there's a lot of emotional appeal in it. He pointed out how certain foods are harming Americans, and Robert Kennedy was very happy about that. He specifically chose Robert Kennedy to address that problem. He spoke about how a certain class of athletes were basically outclassing other women. Or, I mean, if you define these people as women, then they were outclassing them by a huge margin. And how unfair that was to people who had been born a woman. So that has also created a lot of applause. And frankly, several lines of his created a lot of applause to his domestic audience. So essentially, this is a speech for a domestic audience. As far as tariffs are concerned, yes, he did mention India, but quite frankly, we do impose 100% tariff on electric cars. And if they impose 100% tariffs on Indian electric cars, it's not going to make much of a difference. But in any case, I don't think our electric car manufacturers are going to export to America. So quite frankly, that's not an issue that is serious. On some other issues, there's no question that we'll have to, we'll have to look again at the import duties. We'll have to look again at the tax structure and ensure that the cost of production is kept down, because Trump is very serious about reciprocal tariffs. So from that point of view, I think the government of India, I'm sure it's very active in judging which industries will be affected and what tax changes, what tariff changes, what regulatory changes are needed. For example, MSMEs and SMEs, more bank finance would go to them, more, you can have a lot done to ensure the MSME and SME sector in India grow very fast. So that's also nothing wrong with that. The fact of the matter is, this is addressed to his domestic audience. The point was, of course, he addressed his base and his party people. And he wanted to keep the party and his base strong. And he wanted the wider public to understand what he was doing so that there will not be a problem in 2026 in the midterms. So overall, it was frankly a very predictable speech. And as far as tariffs are concerned, it's already been pointed out that some of our tariffs are very high. But on certain industries, there's no problem. In the sense, 100% tariff on electric cars will affect Tesla. It's not going to have a problem with Mahindra, provided Mahindra ramps up production and is competitive with Tesla at a much lower tariff, which I'm sure Mahindra's and other Indian companies will do. So I am personally not a person who is very negative about this. As far as Indo-Pacific is concerned, yes, he is very clear. You have to take sides. You can't balance here and there. You can't swing one day with America and the next day with China. Trump is very focused on China. He doesn't want China to overtake the United States in any field, and the Chinese know it. And now, they got Justin Trudeau, who's been friendly to China, since the days of his father. But the fact of the matter is that his focus is on China, and India is also essential in that particular focus. So I do believe that we'll have to be very clear-cut, at least in the internal discussions with the United States, about where we stand on this whole issue of Cold War 2.0 between the US and China. So I think, frankly, the time for strategic ambiguity is over, at least as far as private conversation is concerned. And frankly, I don't see very much of expectation from blossoming of India-China relations. We make the concessions, they don't make the reciprocal.
Okay, Rabindra Sachdev, let me quickly draw you in here. Point taken, Professor Nalapal. Let me quickly get in Rabindra Sachdev now as well. On this, of course, the tariffs question as well, on the economic impact of, President Trump's policies. What is that going to be? Markets have, of course, taken a hit. Canada has threatened retaliatory tariffs. Trump is saying he'll slap more if that happens. China, meanwhile, is saying they're ready to fight any war with the US, be it a trade war or any other as well. What do we make of, the economic impact of these statements by Donald Trump?
So much, Uday. Pleasure to be with you and the distinguished panel. On tariffs, let's step back a little and then I'll drill down. Trump looks at it for the last 40 odd years, ever since always, that other countries have been taking advantage of America. That's been his stated position since the 1980s and 90s. Always. First it was the Japanese, then it was the Arab sheikhs, etc., etc. So when he's imposing tariffs and he's asking for reciprocal, there is actually some truth in it, clear truth in it. The weighted average tariff of America, across all goods and categories, etc., is, I think, around 2.5%. The weighted average of EU tariffs all across is around 7.5%. I may be off a bit here there. China is around 8.5%. Our dear old India is around 10%, right? So there is some logic to that, what he's saying, that tariff could be reciprocal. Now, that aside, Trump looks at tariffs not only as punishing the nations and balancing this out, he looks at tariffs as a source of income for the government of America. Let's put it that way. Okay, tariffs are what they are, essentially taxes and paid by Americans themselves, right? Import duties. And as per their calculations, or some calculations as of now, these tariffs so far which are announced would yield around $150 billion for the US Treasury, let's say. Now we come to the other aspect of the inflation and all, which will be caused within America. Now, how Trump is looking to tackle that is, one, the monies which are collected by tariffs, he'll use wherever, but they're looking to give tax breaks and subsidies to specific industries which are affected. So let's say the auto industry would be affected because steel producers will benefit in America, but the steel consumers of American steel will have to pay more. The aeroplane makers, the construction industry, etc. So what the Trump administration is looking at is that taking some of this money which they've generated through the tariffs and passing it on to some of these sectors. That's one. The other strategy which Trump is looking at in terms of tackling inflation and the price rise due to all this uncertainty of tariffs is lowering the cost of energy and oil and fuel. That's why he's driving so hard within America, drill baby drill, with Russia, with the Arab states, etc. Because oil, diesel, transportation is a significant contributor to the cost of goods. So the Trump administration, I think, is looking at two things to balance somehow the inflation or the price rise. One is tariffs, some money from one pocket given to the American industry or consumers in some form of rebates or whatever. Secondly, lowering the energy prices so that the overall impact of inflation could be reduced. So that's one. Now coming to India. Sure, India will, we'll see whatever, etc. But India, there's one clear-cut, impact which will be there, which is, he has said, other than reciprocal, clearly on aluminum and steel. India exports about $1 billion worth of aluminum, various categories, and about $500 million of steel. If these tariffs are imposed, then our exports would go down by around 30 to 40%. Or Hindalco, let's say the largest aluminium, they'll have to look at other markets, EU, etc.
Yes.
So if it's 1.5 billion, I mean, it's looking at, you're looking at about $400, $500 million loss in this market or whichever way and going there. Last point I'll say, in terms of, his Panama, Greenland, etc., and even Ukraine, yes, he's a businessman, but as I think all of our panel agrees, he's also a strategist. In Panama, what he's doing, he's trying to get the Chinese companies or Chinese influence out of South Central America. Now, when he says we are getting Panama back, it's not America getting it. It's BlackRock, a large fund, one of the largest in the fund. What BlackRock has done, it has acquired only yesterday one port, which is one side of the canal, the other port, it has acquired two ports, both sides of the canal, in a deal of about $20 billion from Hutchison in Hong Kong. Hutchison, remember, Star News parent company? So now, Blackstone or American company is owner of these two ports, and sure, it's a business for them and it's strategic interest for America. Similarly, in Ukraine, yes, he wants the mineral deal in order to get the dollars back. By the way, he throws wrong numbers. Let's be honest about it. $350 billion is nowhere the amount of money which America sent to Ukraine. They've sent, according to their own government websites, around $180 billion. So he plays fast and furious with numbers, but keep that aside. So he wants, of course, the money coming back to America. We paid them so much, but at the same, so that's the business side of it. But at the same time, he is reducing America's dependency on critical minerals and metals from China, which controls the market. And you need these minerals for your missiles, for your computers, avionics, etc., etc.
Yeah, point taken. I'm afraid we've run completely out of time, so we're going to have to leave it at that. My thanks to all of our guests for joining us on this broadcast. It's time to slip into a very short break.